July board meeting. Ms. Davis.
To the plaintiff, Ida Tradition people, we respectfully acknowledge that in the original inhabitants of Southeast Alaska, Bartlett Regional Hospital is located on the homeland of. We're grateful to provide services in your ancestral homeland and to be a part of this community.
Thank you. Okay, let's try this again. For those of you who just joined us, we've called to order again on have heard our land acknowledgement. Anita, could you please have the table?
Okay, Dr. Fernandez. Present. Jeannie Munn. Chris Letterman.
Here.
Dr. Kingy.
Present.
Max Mertz.
Yes.
Lisa Peterson. Al Geiger.
Present.
Dr. Rasters.
Here.
Jeff Johnston. Here. And we got Dr. Hopper. See Marie Pollard. Good.
Thank you all. Yes, I would entertain a motion to, I'm sorry. I would not. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Sure, I move to approve.
Do we have anybody for public participation? I don't see anyone in the room and nobody online.
We got Mark Sabatini and Dr. Dan Hart online.
Okay. Anyone who would like to speak to the board at this point? Hearing nothing, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Now I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda. Second that.
Thank you. All right. Full business. Capacity report. Ms. Medicare.
For patient days for June, CTU was 54, MedSurg 358, MHU 261, OB 58, newborn nursing 39. The emergency assistant saw a little over 1,000 patients last month. We have not had to institute code triage in June. As far as placement, we are waiting to place 4 patients for something we have /SNF, 2 long-term care, and 2 hospice again.
On the hospice.
So, Madam Chair, the information's in the packet for you to review. Erin is out of town. Things remain fairly stable at home health and hospice with the staff we have in our census. The most, I guess, the best update and some thanks to give is we did transition smoothly from ProCare, who was our DMA provider for hospice, to bringing that DME in-house. So Bartlett's now providing DME for hospice services, which is required. It took a lot of work. So thanks to facilities and materials management, Angela, and a bunch of other folks that got that together, to be able to do that. And we had a very quick turnaround time to make that. And that's the most recent update for home health and hospice.
Yes, thanks. Any questions? Okay, seeing none, well, for update, just
Thank you, everyone. So off our report, I just want to note a correction, please. I have May listed on this report. It is in fact for June. So I didn't change the month. Our average daily census in June was right around 54, just a hair under 55, and our occupancy rate was 86%. And as of today, we are at 54 residents.
any questions for Ms. Coach?
I'm sorry, I should have added this first. I do want to state that, not too long ago, Deb did give a report on state surveyors that were at Wildfire Court. As a normal process, federal surveyors come in, it's a re-verification survey, so they're verifying the state surveyors' work. And they were spent several days with us till late evening, gave us a handful of action items that we're working on. And once we get a clear picture of what that looks like, we'll be able to report that at the next.
Questions? Okay, the foundation. Ms. McCormick, thank you for joining us. You are muted.
Oh, I'm not. Okay, now I am. Okay, just a quick report this time. Obviously, you have the report in front of you, but we have selected all of our scholarship recipients, and we have a record amount of scholarship distribution going out this year of $37,500. Our recipients have all been notified, and our checks will be going out here in the upcoming weeks for their first session for fall. Spearfish Coffee continues to perform well, and we've been talking about how positively it's been received by our Bartlett staff. So we're really appreciative of having Spearfish Coffee in the building. Seems to be doing actually quite well. So I'm very happy to note that. We are doing our donor appreciation event and pig roast. It has been scheduled for September 26th. It'll be at the Juneau Yacht Club. There will be an auction and a dessert auction. So we're hoping that all of the board members mark your calendars, as we're going to be inviting you to join us as well. You should be getting an invitation or a save the date here within the next week or so regarding that. Our total amount to date for foundation investment in Bartlett Regional Hospital is $49,937.04. Does anybody have any questions for me?
Questions? Great news about the scholarships. The record scholarships, I went through the those who received them. It's a broad spectrum of folks and potential degrees. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. New business, the letter to the assembly, and I'm going to turn this over to you guys.
Okay,
Because
there's a memo on page 36 in the packet, the cover memo, and then that is followed, that's page 36, correct? If I'm wrong. Or 32, I'm sorry. And then the letter that Deb and I penned to the assembly about this topic follows that on page 33 in the packet. We discussed this at finance this past week, and I guess the question that we're posing to the board is whether we should take further action with respect to the assembly. And for further action, we discussed at the committee meeting being, writing another letter to the assembly, going to the public comment section or not into the item section of the assembly and further raising the issue. And Brandon, might leave anything out? Yeah, do you want to add into that?
first I want to say that I want to acknowledge that Jeannie was doing this.
Oh, great.
So you might want to ask Jeannie before you,
Yeah, I didn't.
as a
I didn't know
committee
she-
member.
Hey, Jeannie, is there anything more you want to add about that?
She knew.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm got kind of sketchy cell service. But no, I don't have anything to add. Thanks.
So I guess the cover letter and the introduction, the three documents that we're looking at really cover it very clearly. And the question is whether we want to take further action. It appears to be clear that this is not I guess it's not clear. It's not clear that this is, so it's a precedent-setting move on the part of the assembly. I would hate for us to be the beta tester for this action. And I want us to be thoughtful in our process moving forward. However, as I said, that this is an unprecedented, to our knowledge, move on the part of the assembly to transfer those funds from our fund balance to an outside organization. So you want to continue, or either the committee members, do we have any questions from the board?
Well, maybe I'd just add that the finance committee did feel like some further action should be taken.
Yes.
Part of the risk is that this might be the first of future transfers. In fact, in the memo that Robert Barr penned to the assembly about this, said that they expected Gas and Human Services. So what happened was the Gas and Human Services came to the CBJ late in the budget session and said, hey, we need more money for the mental health program that used to be housed inside Rainforest Recovery Center. And that, and the city manager, Robert Barr, penned a letter that said, you can either take this from, you can tell them no, you can take it from some other funding source, I can't remember, or you can take it from Bartlett Regional Hospital. And the assembly voted to take it from Bartlett Regional Hospital. This is, and I haven't exhaustively gone back and looked, but I audited the city from 1993 forward. And my understanding and belief is that there has never been a transfer like this from an enterprise fund, any enterprise fund, to a outside the scope of that enterprise fund. And it was on the letter. It's on the next page of the letter. There's also a very clear prohibition in the charter to that, that the assembly that I think has prior assemblies have looked to guide them about whether they should take money from an enterprise and use it for non-enterprise activity. So there we are. I guess we wanted to come to the full board and get full board's take on this. We talked, timing as well, whether now or
Right.
a month from now, there's, a lot of things in there. If it's some level right now, maybe it'd be better to do it at some future date. So.
Lisa,
So basically, we're still funding the program.
only differently.
Yeah. If you would go up to,
Instead of us supporting our rainforest, now they're moving the money differently.
yeah,
Okay.
go down to the bottom. Yeah, that chart right there. So when the two tables that we see there, just to make sure it's very clear about kind of what the history of this thing was, is that CBJ, the table at the top shows going back to 96 when CBJ operated that program. They were losing a little bit less than $1 million in those dollars then, which was much more, of course, now. And then CBJ would transfer money into the program to kind of make it whole, if you will. And then 2000, for various reasons, they decided to transfer to Bartlett. So Bartlett started maintaining it, running the program. And you can see the CBJ support through 2002, which is around $1 million. And then the chart, the next chart, carries that forward. It shows that funding by the CBJ up to about 2017 or 2018. So CBJ was essentially continuing to subsidize that program. And the reason is that, as we all know, it just, there's not enough federal or state money to support that program. And they decided for whatever reason, the assembly at the time did, that by FY '22, they had zeroed the funding out to Bartlett. So if you go to the next page, so basically they just cut off the funding and it left Bartlett then essentially in '23 and '24, or by '24, operating funding that with a $1.4 million loss. And that's when this board made the decision to stop that program. So now that it went to RRC and I'm sorry, to Gas and Human Services. And now Gas and Human Services came back to the assembly and said, we need more money. And the assembly in turn took that money from Bartlett to kind of close your.
They would give us any money.
Yes. And then, of course, the impact is that it was a $247,000 transfer, and we had been promised by the assembly $200,000 to help us support hospice and home care, which during that time we did decide to continue support for. So not only are we not getting the $200,000 transfer from Bartlett, but we're also giving an additional $47,000 so they can package that 247 and give it to Gas and Human Services. So there we are.
That's all. I'm going to give you an opportunity to comment if you so wish.
Yeah, I was in the room and this was suggested. Thank you, Max, for the history of that. And, you know, seeing that steep drop off, it makes me wonder, was Bartlett able to recover, bill for the services they were providing? Were they not getting a dime from any other funding source, any grants or? Okay.
No, the funding is it's almost 100% Medicaid. There's occasionally other really small funding, but effectively these programs are covered by Medicaid. And it's under the state waiver program. State waiver program provides a per unit service. That per unit service can be based on a number of billing units that you might have during a period of time. But when you look at the operating revenues that you see there for 23 and 24, which is the same as earlier years, those operating revenues are strictly Medicaid. That's Medicaid funds programs. I mean, these are mental health programs, and they're just woefully under. Joe.
I just want to make sure it's clear. If you go to the previous page, Anita, when you see the steep drop off in that particular slide, that is only CBJ funding. I want to make sure.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
So that's the sub.
I just wondered is their funding dropped off if you had another funding source that was picking up the slack, but no, okay. And I guess my point to Ms. Peterson, nurses, would be that 247,000 isn't funding. That's their shortfall that they were asking for. And yeah, as you know, the city was faced with some pretty unprecedented challenges this year. Including the remodel of the Silvering Center, which used to be something that was under Bartlett's umbrella. And so anyway, but Bartlett transferred. Oh, good. And here's Assembly Member Alicia, although a little late to be caught up on this discussion, but anyway, I think that was a decision. It was presented to us. We didn't have a lot of background information about the history of the funding of this program. But I don't think it's the beginning of the trickle of a big, lot from enterprise funds. I don't believe that's the intention at all. And you want to bring Alicia up to speed in a nutshell and see if she has a comment on that.
Ms. Uskani, just to bring you up to speed where we're at, we're on item number 8, new business, the letter to the assembly that was presented during the budget process. And the issue is, we discussed this at the finance committee, whether we needed to take further action. The committee recommended that we indeed at least provide, follow up with the assembly. We had a fair amount of discussion. We discussed whether timing in the near future was the best option, knowing what's facing the distraction of the looming flood and a few other things that are happening at CBJ. But we're here today to determine whether we want to take this back to the assembly in a, could you highlight our approach to bringing it back to the assembly?
Well, one option is to basically give this letter back to y'all. We've been told, I was personally told by one assembly member, we've heard from others that they didn't see our letter prior to the meeting, that it was, you guys had a lot of other things on your plate. And so as much as anything else, now that has, the issue with the, that's died down relative to the budget. Just say, here's kind of the impact that we're facing based on this. And I got to simply, Paul, I got to tell you, I'm very concerned that this will create a future trend. I mean, the history of the assembly has been, once you start a funding mechanism, they don't turn off easily. And it's not only that, it's inside the assembly with respect of using Bartlett as kind of a till of cash for funding some program. We don't have money, and we just don't have money. Where you'll hear later is when we get back into our financials that we're going to have a huge loss this year because of a bunch of factors. We just, in order to keep our head above water, every dollar counts. And so when money's taken away from the program we're counting, it has a huge lasting impact on the hospital's liability. And that's the reason for bringing it back to the assembly as much as anything else. It's just an education thing to maybe express the impact it really has had.
And yeah, I'll go ahead and comment to that. And then if Assembly Member Hugh Scanny has something to say, please do so. That brings me to, I had another one of the nonprofit folks that is highly dependent on Medicaid funding say, has the Assembly been briefed what's happening with Medicaid and the impact that's going to have on so many of the folks doing the heavy lift in the community? I think that would be a good thing. I don't know how that could look, because maybe if the hospital, like Jamie and say, different ones dependent on Medicaid could provide a brief memo to the, I'll let the city manager sort that out with all the folks involved. But I think the assembly absolutely needs to be brought up to speed on how devastating the loss of the cuts to the Medicaid program are going to impact so many of the programs in the community and our, primarily our hospital. Yeah. So, but no, thanks for this. And I look at it as an education opportunity, not this adversarial.
Yeah, we don't mean it to be adversarial. It's just that's not the intent at all, but it's more of an alarm bell. And I don't necessarily, the Medicaid condition has been in place for 20 years. I mean, that it's gotten more acute recently for sure. But I mean, that underfunding of these programs, that's why the CBJ was having to pay the $1 million plus a year that it was having to pay for this program forever. It's the perspective and, the concern that we have about, making sure that, Bartlett is left whole. And it wasn't, we felt like the charter says it should have been. And so we'd like y'all to reconsider it, honestly. But I'm just doing first, to be honest, about the rest of the. Really want to prepare the conversation.
Mr. Skims, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I'll tag in just for a second. Sorry that I'm late. I'm, as you can probably tell from how I'm dressed, I'm just a building away. I'm in Bartlett right now, but I am well. That's not to alarm anyone, but I am, I'm over here in the ER. Just a little bit of humor there. So I think we should definitely revisit this. I'm of the mind that this is that something that, minus, like, of course, I agree, care for scheduling around the flood. But I would say, aside from those very practical and logistical considerations, the sooner the better, because the way I see this is kind of two different things, which is, it's important for, I agree if you're wearing your Bartlett hat, it's very, very important to sound this alarm early, and do this education early. And especially so if you feel like your position is one that's more varied, or you're in a position where every dollar is going to count. And I know that's true in every environment, every dollar counts. But the sooner we hear that, the better, because as we know, this was a 2-year process, so that's going to happen again. And then that secondary piece is about that kind of that charter piece. And I would agree, I think that I would agree that, like, there's more to that's worth scratching at, that people didn't have time to, given the context of all the other decisions that were being made at that time. And in the spirit of collaboration and clarity moving forward together in, for when those sorts of situations might arise. We want to make sure that everybody on both bodies, it's something you have talked about on your body, but the assembly gives, to an exhaustive degree, it allows that body to get any education they need, ask any questions they need, clarify any misunderstandings. And then, that will lead to the policy decisions being made going forward. So, I know I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage just getting that kind of bringing me up to speed quickly, but that's what I would add to that.
Thank you, Mrs. Skims. Could I ask, Mr. Skims, just a clarification question? You said this is the first year in a 2-year process. I didn't, are you talking about for the transfer of funds over to?
I'm talking about the way the assembly approached the budget this year.
Oh, okay, I see. But this transfer.
Right, so we know that some of these, so this is like, these are all singular, no assembly may, no funding decision may bind the hands of future assemblies. So no, that's a complete thing. That's not an intended, and next year expected again. That's me saying, that the assembly is going to be in a similar position next year. So the sooner we slot things in and talk about it, rather than waiting until closer to next year's budget process.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's time for our board members to express their opinions and ask questions. No,
Well, I don't want to go on and on, but I just want to agree with what Max said. He said he's just one board member. Having reviewed some of the material on the rate at which hospitals are failing around the country, and the failure of hospitals in the future in this country, I just view this as an absolute existential threat to the viability of this hospital. And I don't want to be on the board and have the headlines of the papers talking about Bartlett Hospital failing. But if the assembly starts using this as an ATM, that's the road that we're headed down.
it's good.
We went through a very painful period a year and a half ago, maybe less than 2 years ago, where we were
we had all these programs on the chopping block, and we were very clear about the pain of rainforest and the community's anger at us proposing it. And we didn't have any support from Search or really the assembly to help us pay for that program. We had to close it. To me, this seems like a very kind of backdoor way of us continuing to fund it. So I'm kind of disturbed by it, and I understand about the Medicaid cuts, and that's kind of hurt us deeply. And I know these programs are okay, but I thought that Gastineau had a pretty solid plan on how they were going to support this program. So, anyway, I see it. I agree with you. I think it's the first of many trips into Bartlett money to pay for programs. I'm concerned about that. I agree with you. Any other questions?
Sure, if I may, I support, the concern, but are there other options that at finance you were talking about? Are you talking about trying to get the money back or just an educational, hey, look, this really hurt us. We really can't do this in the future.
I think that it's the message delivery of the current impact of the transfer on us and on hospice and home care that we're trying to keep alive. So put it on the table for them, John, that, hey, if you guys wanted to undo this transfer, that would be great. But certainly going forward, we can't talk, we can't, financially stand it. So I would say it's both, frankly. I don't see any reason for us to say we think that was wrong to do that. And we'd like to see you undo it. If not, at least from taking it more in the future.
Being one of the newer board members, I was surprised to hear the mayor and others show up at that board meeting a couple of months ago and sort of give this as an indicator of what could potentially be happening. And I going back to what Max was, very well articulated in this letter, had thought there were some provisions in foundational city governance documents that prevented sort of this ATM kind of approach. I mean, I don't know. It's not that, but I understand it fits the analogy. The concern, the biggest concern that I have, and it actually parrots what Hal was saying, is this quote from the deputy manager saying that we believe it is very likely this will turn into an annual recurrent request. If it's a request, it's one thing, but I don't think this was a request. This was flat out. This is a financial transfer by the assembly against the board's sort of advice. And I think it is on us to educate. I don't defer to that at all. I think we should probably can do a better job of educating, but I'm worried for the future. I'll put it that way.
I just want to, in my mind, clarify something that you said. Because of the urgency and expediency of the budget process, I don't believe that Bartlett had the opportunity to advise whether or not to do that. It was the assembly when the mayor and others showed up, discussed it. We responded with a letter, but I have no idea how many of the assembly members were able to read and observe that letter before the decision was made. But I don't think we advised them. We did prior to the vote express our concerns, but I don't know if the assembly, if the timeline was such that the assembly had the opportunity to actually absorb the content of the documents that we provided prior to the vote. Missy Sanders.
Hi, thanks. So I wanted to make sure a couple of things were pretty crystal. One, this quote by the deputy manager, we believe this will be a likely, return into a recurring request. So to be clear, that is, we received this request from Gastineau Human Services. So it is the deputy manager's job to provide the best advice he can to the assembly. And we got lots of things that we heard are going to be one time, but staff being more versed or experienced and taking a look at all the factors there are going to say, yeah, they're saying it's a one-time thing, but we think that this is going to turn into, when I look at that financial picture, we expect that this is going to turn into an every year thing. So I just wanted to be clear on that. That quote is referring to, in the memo that it was received, was related to GHS and them making the requests. And I say that just because there's multiple bodies at play here between Bartlett and the assembly and the external partner. And then also just to note that, that 247, very similar to the $200,000 subsidy amount that was also listed on the pending list, that was assembly to the hospital itself. So just in terms of talking about the not making light of that amount, but just to help provide that context, it's important to remember that that was, for practical purposes, from the assembly's viewpoint, potentially close to a wash versus, when looking at reducing subsidies, et cetera. I think a better way of thinking about, again, it is your job to wear the Bartlett hat. I want you to wear the Bartlett hat. I want you to, of course, view being in a negative financial position as kind of worst case scenario and hit the alarm bells when you feel that way. These are all good things to do, but I will say the same way that, the assembly wants you to wear those hats, it is probably more helpful when we're talking about education or this and that, as not thinking of the city as viewing the hospital as an ATM, because truly the hospital is a community hospital. So it is a city hospital. So I say that, and I know you know this, but I say this just because I think all this kind of stuff matters the way we enter into it. There are other, people CC'd on this letter. I had a grand old time discussing this letter with the Chamber of Commerce as an example of an external partner, and the way that the assembly's actions were reviewed. So I say that again because we truly are one organization, right? So for every time we say something like that, then we also have to say, like, well, we had a supplemental on the agenda last night due to some timing issues that happened after the Bartlett annual budget. But so for all of these things, it's a back and forth, it's a dual body system, and I would say it's better to think of us as a singular being than to think of one as using the other as an ATM. Because I would say that's not just like a really helpful place to start.
I have to say, I would agree that the analogy was, I don't think our concerns are unwarranted. But I agree with you that we should approach it in a collaborative educational manner, hoping that this would not be a recurring
transaction or trend or a trend. However, my personal hope would be that through a collaborative effort, we could figure this out, have a discussion, provide the education, and get everybody up to speed with what's facing us, and what the in the future. I guess my biggest comment would be a little bit more notice would have been helpful. I realized that that the assembly was under the gun. I do realize that, but the notice was very surprising to us, and hard to react to in such a short manner. I saw a hand up over. Geez, Jeannie, let's go with that.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Sorry I don't have my camera on. I really agree. I would want this to be as collaborative as possible. And I think part of what I'm feeling is that from the assembly, it wasn't collaborative. When the mayor came to our meeting and I specifically asked, are we making a decision? And the answer was no, you do not have a vote in this. So in that sense, it definitely did not feel collaborative. But I don't think we need to kind of rehash with the assembly how it happened. It's really a matter of what it means. And basically, the assembly chose to take the 200,000 earmarked for hospice and home care and tell us it was going to a different agency. And that has impact because we're losing money. And I think that's the piece that we have to educate the assembly members on, the financial challenges that Bartlett faces, and that we may have to make hard decisions. And having the assembly kind of coming in and making decisions for us is not a helpful collaborative process. Thanks.
Do we have any more comments or questions from any of the other board members? I thought I saw a hand go up on that side of the room, but if you're done with your board, I can say. Sure.
I was just agreeing with Assembly Member Hughes Handy's that when we saw that memo and it stated that we believe it is very likely this will turn into an annual recurring request. You know, again, it was presented to us very late in the cycle, and I totally took that to mean GHS would be coming to the city. So heads up, we need to figure out long-term support for this program, but in no way did this assembly person interpret it that every year we're going back to Bartlett. And I also, you know, if you can help me remember when you presented to us, you know, you were in a much better fiscal position this past year than you were previously. But now it's potentially heading in the other direction.
One of the big thing is the federal government hasn't funded something called the Rural Demonstration Program to the tune of $7 million. We had that in FY25. We were fully expecting it for 26. They did not fund 26. It's stuck in Congress. The Senate has passed it. The House is not. Joe will probably update us on that sooner or later. $7 million out the door.
Yeah, and so this is that education piece that's so widely needed to help help everyone understand how our local deliver healthcare.
So at this point, is it the will of the board to go back to the assembly in to provide that education
and express our concerns and give the opportunity for dialogue and questions about what Bartlett is facing. And any other.
That's my position, yes. I think it would be irresponsible to do anything else. This is a really big deal, I think. And I think we have to express our concern.
Can I just need a lot of ignorance about how this works? Is the assembly already decided that the money is done, or is there, I mean, is there like, it's gone, right?
Yeah, so they built it into the appropriation, the annual appropriation, when they approved the budget ordinance.
And
So it's a done deal.
it's a done deal.
So they have to do another ordinance to undo it, to restore the 247, or they could restore it through next year's budget process too, which is.
And the year is July to July, or?
Yeah.
July, so it just passed, okay. I mean, I definitely, being a new board member and not really knowing a lot, I agree that education needs to happen, right? And that the snapshot that you guys were under the impression that we were at one area, what time is not the one that we have now. So, I think, we need to, I agree with Mark, with Max and with Hal, that we should present something, and figure out how we can continue to fund our hospital, because if we don't have a functional hospital, then we don't have a great community, but we also do need alcohol and dependency services in the community. So we all need to come up with solutions about how this can work, because there's, federal government not giving us money to help in the programs that are underfunded.
Is there anyone on the assembly, the assembly? We've been talking about the assembly a lot. Is there anyone on the board that it would object to us taking this back to the assembly? And working with the assembly to determine, or working with administration and assembly to determine when that would be. Seeing none, okay. I don't think we need a resolution for this, but so we will move forward with it. And I really appreciate the assembly members' comments on what we're talking about. So I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the clarification from both of you that your impression was that that you thought it would be a recruiting request, not from the assembly to Bartlett, but from Gaston Human Services to the assembly. So I appreciate that clarification. All right. Have you talked? Great, let's move on to the committee meeting updates. Dr. Ross.
Sure, the planning committee meeting minutes are a representative of the discussion. They start on page 36. And most everything was about the ED, because remember the conduit, and Kim knows more about this than anybody. And we still don't know what's in there, but we decided, do we move forward or not? And the answer is we decided to move forward. It was $300,000 or something within the discretion of the hospital to go ahead and move forward and build a structure around it so that the ED mission and remodel could continue. That was the bulk of the discussion. So if there's any questions, perhaps you should ask Kim or Joe.
Everyone understands what the issue is and what the solution ended up to be that was decided on. Board members, any other questions about them? Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Master? Thank you. Finance and Audit Committee.
Yeah, here we go again. So I wanted to spend, you have the minutes there, and obviously almost the entire meeting was spent with the June results. And Anita, would you go to page 12, please? And I'm going to ask Joe with Anita to kind of walk through some of the big pieces of page 12 so that everybody has a good understanding of what we're doing here. So
You should, man.
just make it as big as possible. And then, can you vary the, visual function? And start at the bottom and I'll lay the groundwork and I'll tee it up. As I'm sure Joe will appreciate. So in June, we recorded a $6.6 million loss, line 40, $6,649,000 loss in June. Which made our loss year to date about $8 million. And there were some really huge adjustments that had to be booked in June that are in this next column over. And then some of those had, that leaves what is then the adjusted amount, kind of more normalized results in the middle column. The June only impact of those, and then effectively what our, if be it not for these adjustments that we had to record, what the bottom line would have been, which would have been $295,000. So it's a little jarring, and it's significant. And if you would roll up now, Anita, to the top of the page, stop right there. Yeah. So lines 11 through 15 are where you can see most of these adjustments hit. The second column's the $9.4 million that had to do with the amount of reimbursement that we're getting from the federal government and other sources that were different than what our initial expectations were. That created most of the adjustments that we recorded in June. So essentially, it's not a revenue, it's so you know, what we should get paid and what we actually get paid are two different things, right? So this is what we actually got paid and what we expect to be paid is now significantly less than we originally thought we were going to be paid. And Joe, I'm going to kick it off to you, and if you would kind of do your best to King's English what happened there.
Yeah, thank you, Max.
Yeah, you're welcome, Joe.
Basically sleeping at this point anyway, so it's all fine. So as we did our contractual allowance throughout the year, what we tried to do was we tried to flatten it out so we didn't have the ups and downs on a month-to-month basis. But as we got farther and farther in the year, our reimbursement kept eroding and eroding and eroding. To the point, and then it just escalated quickly the last couple of months. And so we saw a major change in the way Medicare started reimbursing us starting in January. And the way our contractual model works, it's a rolling 12 months. So it takes a couple of months until you have enough data and volume of data to actually affect the percentages. And so as we got into the, May and June, we started seeing this. So when we got to May, we're like, okay, we're gonna have an issue. That's why we saw the big loss in May, thinking we might collect more in June. Unbeknownst to the not getting down to what that Medicare was, materially underpaying us at that point. So as we got to the June amount, like it really ramped up. And so we had enough data where it was easier to dig in and figure out if there was a material change in how we were paying us on the DRG level. And so that was the driving factor behind some of this. And so when we got to that point, when we get to audit, we have to go back to what we actually collected. And so we basically did a true up to audit adjustment. So this is, we feel audit proof contractual allowance set up at this point. What are we doing in regards to this? We do have a letter out to Medicare trying to amend that reimbursement. Our hopes is that they actually go back and change on a claims base and go back and repay our DRGs for the last 6 months. If they don't, the contractual model continues to have rollover issues because it shows that lower reimbursement, and we're always going to have to try to calculate for that, which just complicates the issue. They could just do it through the cost report in a true up fashion and pay us that in the lump sum, which gets us the cash, but doesn't really help us in our contractual model. We saw, reductions in reimbursement across several different payers. Medicare was the big one. We also saw Medicaid, workers' comp, search, all see decreases in the way that they reimbursed us. Some of the providers can probably attest that during this fiscal year, search sent letters to almost all providers that they were going to change how they reimburse people. We saw a market decrease in some of the reimbursement from search.
So Joe, if we could tease apart a couple of things here, just to be as clear as we can. One is the Medicare demonstration, rural demonstration program. So when you look at these numbers up here, they would be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but our bottom line would be $7 million higher because we wouldn't have had those deductions for the DRGs that we've had. So essentially what's happened is we've reduced our revenue by $7 million more than we had to in FY25 because Congress hasn't acted to restore the rural demonstration program. That's the big impact. These tertiary, this other impact that you're talking about for the DRG reimbursement is a different issue.
Yeah, it is.
And it's compounds that issue.
It compounds it.
Yes.
And they actually roll up together because, I mean,
Yeah.
in the way we get paid for demonstration, they pay us costs. So this, I want to settle up through the cost report. It would never have been an issue because we get that cost-based reimbursement. It's an issue because that went away. It's actually twofold. You typically get the payment throughout the year and it's paid at the normal rate. We just have the like last year it was 3.2 million. But since we had a decrease in that reimbursement, that's why the settlement becomes 7 million. That's the difference between the cost and what was reimbursed. If that makes sense. Yeah. And it kind of compounds. We did try to go through and we changed our contractual model last year. Some of it, the way the bad debt kind of rolled out was pulled up into contractuals. We had to realign those so it hit the right bucket. So that's why you see some of the changes throughout that. But it does show, even with demonstration, we have work to do just to get our expenses in line with what we have for revenue coming.
Yeah, and speak to that a little bit at finance, one of the requests the finance committee made of Joe and Angela was to take a fresh look at the FY27 budget and recast it in light of what's going on with rural demonstration and everything else, just so we can look at all these liability initiatives that we've been working on to try to keep our head above water. So, if you could speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, what we've done is we had Andrew actually do some work on what we're getting paid. So the first step is where do we see the changes and how we're getting paid? Because that's going to be the biggest piece here. So all we're looking at is the cash flow side, not the expense side. And so we've started that process. We haven't had time to sit down and actually hash out what the numbers look like at this point. And what we hope to come back to is kind of something that looks a lot like this. We're going to show you like what our FY27 budget was when we started working on it in December. What we expect it to be based on these numbers, what could be as we change things moving forward. What's the potential there? And so it should look as 3 different line items. Where we are today without demonstration and any work done, and what it could be in the future if we're able to get that program extended and get some of these things back.
Could you talk, I know it's a little bit out of order, but since we're in the finance, we're talking about demonstration, talk about your understanding where the rural demonstration reauth comes or where we are on that.
So the demonstration did pass through Senate unanimously. And so at that point, it went to the House, which they referred to the House Ways and Means Committee. Per Beggich's office, they were working, trying to get it and push forward through a process called suspension, where they suspend the normal rules and they roll it through that House vote. They have 40 minutes to talk through it. And if they get a majority vote, it could just become effective at that point. My understanding is, and this is what they're telling me, is the chair of Ways and Means does not want the bill to move forward that way. And so he's going to require it to go the normal process. So right now, the bill is stuck in Ways and Means Committee, awaiting a hearing and a markup. They feel that it will pass through Ways and Means Committee. It will not get before the August recess, which means it's probably going to be slightly delayed. So timing is a concern for us as we post our year end. The way the bill is written today, if they do pass it post audit, it would become retro, and we could file an amended cost report at that point. The senator's office and Beggich's office both expressed confidence that the bill would move forward. They feel that they're still gaining velocity. There are hospitals dropping off the program on a quarterly basis at this point. And so the more hospitals that drop off, the more support you get from those senators, those congress, as they start to go away. And so I'm sending constant emails to the point where they're probably getting sick of me doing.
Keep sending them.
Yeah, I will. So that's kind of where we are on that side. There was something that was introduced in the outpatient prospective payment system that could be beneficial to Bartlett. They actually came forward, and Senator Sullivan actually kind of took credit for it in the email that was sent to us. We've always got a kind of a COLA that's associated with the rest of the United States. And what they've done is they pulled out Alaska and Hawaii to give a COLA that's more adequate for the state. And so what that would do is it would change our cost of living adjustment for the outpatient bills that we receive, which is the majority of our Medicare revenue is outpatient. We get a lot more money from outpatient Medicare than we do from inpatient. We would see roughly a 7% increase in those payments on January 1st if that comes in. So it would be a material adjustment from anything we've seen in the past. On an annual basis, like we're lucky to get 2% from Medicare. So why 7% doesn't sound like a lot. It's way more than we typically get. So that's in front of us. In addition to that, we just start ramping into all the things we're gonna work on.
Yeah,
This kind of goes into my report a little bit. I did, as we did in our special meeting, some of the items we talked about, and they're outlined in my letter. So I want to make sure that all staff understand what's going on in front of us too. So I have all those items outlined in this letter I sent to the board. This will be going to staff tomorrow morning. So full transparency, everyone's gonna know what's going on. As of today, the thing we've probably spent the most time on is getting our clinic switched over to Rural Health Clinic. We've stood up a weekly meeting. We've got the team in place. Gail's gonna lead the charge on that. We've engaged with the compliance team to get our survey kind of in order. I'm shooting for to have everything in line by the end of September. October 1st. At that point, we hopefully have them come and survey us, and at that point we'd be in cost, or we get that designation for Rural Health Clinic, which, as we discussed, would be $1 million swing for that particular clinic. At the same time, we're gonna do both family medicine and pediatrics at the same time. Peds impact isn't quite as much. It's roughly 250,000. It gets both of those clinics, so basically a breaking point for us. So it switches the dynamic focus. We've also engaged case management. I know they're working with physicians on a one-on-one basis to get more of our patients from observation to end. As we discussed, we had a disproportionate share of observation to inpatient stays. Some of that, I think, there's always issues with how you bring a patient to inpatient. If it's obs, there's certain complications versus inpatient. I think we just overcorrected one direction too far. So we're just bringing it back so we're actually close to the national average. This is particularly beneficial if demonstration is expanded because it moves more of our dollars into the cost-based reimbursement methodology. So that's where that would be beneficial. We also kicked off our swing bed implementation team today. And so we'll start moving towards swing bed. That has potential to impact both the hospital and Wildflower Court. And so we'll start adding more patients to our mix. So as we looked at the census today, there was 2 patients that would have easily been in the swing bed.
Could you just add a little bit of two or three sentences about what swing bed is?
Yeah, swing bed basically is it's a scaled level bed that rural hospitals are able to. It's a program we're able to do with as a rural hospital. And so typically, in like a regular DIG hospital, you transition your patient from your hospital to your skilled nursing facility in a bigger town. This allows the hospital to provide that skill level of nursing. And what it does for Bartlett, that is paid under Part A Medicare is what they call it, which makes it cost-based reimbursed bed when we get to that point. And so if you can change, a couple percentage points more into cost-based, it becomes significant. I don't know.
So what it means,
Without
you've got long-term care beds in the hospital,
Yes.
right? So we have long-term care patients actually in the hospital, and our reimbursement for those is cost-based reimbursement.
Under the administration. There's 2, it's actually beneficial under any payment methodologies we look at it. So right now, we're taking care of the same population at Wildflower. So we send them over, we provide rehab, and Medicare pays us $500 a bed. That does eat up a bed. So we swing them over to the hospital, we're able to provide that care for the exact same reimbursement probably quicker because we don't wait for admission to wildfire port. While we can fill that bed at wildfire port with potentially a Medicaid patient that they double of that on a daily basis. And so that's where the beneficial in that first model and the second model works. Under the cost base, you're able to increase reimbursement on both sides and see more patients. There's also a clinical benefit to that too, because a lot of times patients end up waiting for placement while wildfire port. It is kind of an onerous process that can come up, comment on that. I know Dorothy's talked about it. Sometimes it's tough to get patients in there. But as those beds are filled, we hold them in the hospital at this point, just eating up costs with no additional reimbursement. So it's able to transit them faster to the care they're provided, hopefully outside of our facility in an expedited manner. I'm going to wait and I'll touch base on surgical volumes because it's going to be a more in-depth conversation. So that's where we are looking at revenue expansion at this point. We are looking at some of the lab processes this with family medicine. We're starting doing similar, and that's back to our lab to test the process that has been kicked off. In addition to this, we have stood up the FT committee or expanded and accelerated the FT committee. We are doing 90-minute daily meetings going through every single staff member. We're looking at metrics associated with staff. Going department by department, person by person at this point, basically. So we're not only looking at the revenue side, we have to make sure our costs are in alignment. That doesn't mean like we're looking at major program. We just have to make sure that FT is, looked at. We're also pulling. We've had the increase in the utilization of overtime and some of our premium pays. So we're going back to our directors, ask them to address those issues. So we see the market decrease as we started this conversation, but there is more work to be done on that. And so we're looking at cost control, revenue generation as we move into this. Full transparency, I think we've talked about this. If demonstration isn't extended by the December deadline that we see, I think we need to, as a board and administration, sit down and talk about what critical access is like for this facility.
Have to, choice.
It's going to be our existence of Bartlett probably depend on cost-based and demonstration or critical access.
I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to bring that up. Over the years, there is a precedent for increased Medicare reimbursement in the state of Alaska and Hawaii because in Anchorage, no one could get in to see the doctor. Lisa Murkowski. It was in the early 2000s, I think, Dorothy. You may recall that we had that bump. I could see that coming. But over the years, I've also heard them trying to kill rural demonstration for a long time. And if they ultimately do kill it, then the only way we could get cost-based reimbursement and survive would be critical access. Right? So our financial position has changed to go to Maureen or Alicia from just a few months ago based upon these models that we're seeing. So that's why we're here. Thank you.
I guess the one thing, if you go up to the top of this, I just wanted to point something out so that it's abundantly clear to the board and scroll to the right if you can. Oh, this doesn't have it. You have the normal income statement?
Yeah, it follows this next page.
Next page in it. Yeah, right in there. Yeah, you might have to zoom out just a scope.
I think you want one page too many there. And you're got to go back up to 13.
You got 13.
There you go. There you go.
Right there. So our total gross patient revenue line, scroll to the right, Nita. As you look at the total charges that we produce as a hospital, we saw roughly, next to the top line here. A little more.
There you go.
There you go. That's where we're at a little bit. There you go. So last year, prior year, we went from roughly 290,000 to 300 or 290 million. So we created $25 million in increased charges. 4% of that was obviously just the CDM increase. The majority of that was volume increases. Of that $25 million in increased gross revenue, we only collected $3 million in additional dollars. And so as you look at the percentage of collection, it dropped markedly. So that's just kind of paints the picture to me. Like we are doing more services. We saw increase in revenue, but our reimbursement just not. And so that kind of paints the major picture and the challenges we face with payers at this point. And it's not just, we focus a lot on the federal payers, Medicare and Medicaid, but Blue Cross and Aetna, as they start engaging in more AI tools, it's getting harder and harder to get reimbursed. We're seeing more and more post-payment adjustments as they come back, claw back money. They're using these tools effectively.
AI tools.
AI tools. And so that goes back to some of the stuff we're trying to achieve in the revenue cycle team. We're going to change our front-end processes, try to address this up front. Edge has already engaged in some of those changes, looking at our prior auth requirements. Some of this is we saw some of the pushback today from physicians. We're not allowing surgeries to be scheduled without a prior auth in place. So we've had to cancel surgeries. Just can't have those surgeries taking place with no guaranteed reimbursement in place. And so
They're not being allowed to be scheduled, or they're not allowed to be taken place, because usually you're scheduling further in advance, right, John?
Yes. So when a surgeon came up to me and said, hey, I just found out they might cancel my surgeries because there were no pre-authorizations. And so I did mention to him that is a big push for the hospital. It did come on a little bit abruptly, but now the surgeons are aware. And my staff has done it. I've had the same scheduler for 25 years. So she always gets pre-application. So yes, the surgeons are aware. Because we lost $3 million.
Yeah.
And we just can't live with that. It's a big market. Just on pre-authorizations alone.
just
Yeah.
3.2 million.
And there was a successful lawsuit against United Healthcare for using AI models, because when they wanted more money for their shareholders, because they are a for-profit company, they would dial in so that there were more rejections. And there was a big lawsuit about that. So I'm not sure what's going on with Blues with that, but it is a big issue that's our hospitals facing.
So, August 21st, we'll have a finance committee meeting that should be pretty informative. It will synthesize a lot of what we've been talking about. The obvious bottom line is, without rural demonstration, how do we get to zero? That's what we're after.
You'll probably see the financials looking at this bifurcated model with and without as we move month to month. So people understand the implications of this. Is there any other questions on that?
I think Ken's got questions.
Okay, I just want to do for clarification for the prior auths for Dr. Hernandez. So it's if the prior auth isn't complete and in our hands by 10 o'clock the day before surgery,
That's it.
then it's canceled.
But it can be scheduled, like, for a month.
It can be scheduled, and if the prior auth isn't in by 10 a.m. the day prior to surgery, it'll be canceled.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. But to say you can't schedule it until you get this prior authorized, it's like not.
I think policy says that we require.
Yeah, and so those are different things.
I'll verify. The memo I sent out to the provider was if it wasn't there by 10 a.m. the day prior. I will let policy tech can verify that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And even if it was 48 hours, like that seems reasonable too. But to be able to say, hey, we're gonna schedule your surgery in a month. And but I can't schedule it until I get the prior authorizations scheduled. Those are different things. Because you should be able to schedule a surgery for 4 weeks with the anticipation that it should be able to be done.
Well, ideally, we can see behavioral changes and prior auths are just put in place and they're received before. So we're not doing. I imagine this is gonna be a short term.
I agree. Our office just prior auths everything. So just blanket, and I expect that to be the surgeons will learn.
So, Madam Chair, with that, Joy, that concludes my presentation.
Thanks. Max?
All right, now it's time to move over to the executive administration report. Joe, which you gave me about.
I gave a good chunk of it already. I guess I'll start with some positive news here. So as we talked through Home Health Hospice and are taking on the DME program. We did have a grant from, or not a grant, a donation from the Foundation from End of Life to do that one-time purchase for a lot of the DME. So they gave the hospital $21,647 to help purchase that and get that off the ground. So I just want to make sure they're thanked and recognized for helping support that program, as well as a lot of that is what they've done to move the hospice forward. So just appreciate them being flexible with us during that time. I talked through the demonstration and the timing and the Medicare reimbursement issues.
Hey, Joe, before we get away from that, I just want to tag on to what you said about the end of life. And especially Bruce Wyrock has been very supportive of hospice and home care. And he and I have interacted a bunch over the last couple of months about what they can do going forward for hospice funding specifically. And so they're very active in dialogue.
I know Angela's on there, so we appreciate her.
Yeah.
Thank you, Angela. I guess both of this, I just want to jump right into it. So at our special meeting here in the middle of the month, I promise that I bring back a memo with my recommendation to the board. And so that is included in the packet. I think I've talked about this with med staff at this point, so hopefully it's not a surprise. And then I also include the anesthesia costing model in the packet. So these are all now public documents that are open to be shared. But in light of just our financial challenge, I think we need to consider, and the point of this is we need to bring in the most cost-effective model to open all three of our own stores. And that was the model that was 2 CRNAs, 1 anesthesiologist. There are some particulars that we obviously have to work through. There's some bylaws implications that we'll have to work with med staff. But this will allow us to basically provide 3 rooms of anesthesia in a cost-effective model. Dr. Doughton did bring up that there has been some reimbursement changes with some of the payers. The Blue Cross, Premera in particular, instituted an 85% rule. So they pay CRNAs at 85% of anesthesiologists. That was effective back in March of this year. There are also some other payers that don't really impact us. United Healthcare, Cigna. I think we can just assume that at some point all commercial payers pay that way. But I mean, that's roughly, I'd say, less than 100,000 of total reimbursement decline as you look at that process for our savings of roughly $1 million in costs. So it is a significant ask. The costing models are included in here again. I know we had ample discussion about it last week. But I put that memo together, just kind of stating my point of view. There's a lot going on at the hospital. We have significant headwind with Medicaid cuts coming probably January 1st. So I don't know if there's any questions on that comment. I believe that's what we're asking you for.
Yes, of course. So we're not ready to take. There's no action to be taken, but any questions or comments for Joe on the memo that we asked him to prepare?
I just want to share that this financial information with the costing has not been shared with the general medical staff.
Yeah, that's why I put it in the pack. So I want you guys to share it. And so they had to become a public document. Now it's public document.
So is there an action that not,
Well,
but
with this point, I'm gonna, all this information will be shared with med staff, med exec. And so this will become a public document that I'll be talking with med staff over the coming months, or the coming month. My hope is that I can bring it back to the board for action at the August meeting so we can move this forward.
So the plan is not for an action on this, but this is an initial presentation.
This is initial presentation, this is introduction. We'll talk with med staff over the next 30 days, bring it back to the board for action at that point.
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss.
yes, that's exactly what I was looking for.
My apologies. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this with the medical staff. I appreciate that. I look forward to sharing these details.
I think it's grossly Jody, who's got her finger more on the pulse of med staff. It's a paradigm shift to move from anesthesia to CRNA, right? And then we had moved medical staff to a CRNA addition with oversight of anesthesia. So this is a little further move down to independent practice. So, it can be done, and we're in a financial situation where, is obviously being considered in a recommendation. So we're just continuing to move that information process. Very simple.
Yes, I think this has been an ongoing, we understand that this has been something that has been thought about. This has been issues that ever since back in April when medical staff said it was asked if we thought CRNA should be independent. The medical staff gave recommendation that they should be supervised. So this is proposing to consider a change to that. And this is the medical staff was previously asked from a medical perspective, if it was internal credentialing process, if it was appropriate to give them credentials to practice independently, and the opinion was no, they should be supervised. I understand this to be adding a financial component to the potential need to do that as a hospital. Am I understanding that correctly? This is new information for the medical staff. We've been interested in this information for a while, and I'm really glad that it's going to be shared. We'll look forward to that discussion.
Any other comments? Questions? Oh, is that?
There is not a lot of topic, but there's a significant amount of work going for each of these different items.
Okay, Ms. Brown. Research report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a couple of items. You see a lot of stuff moved around in the completed section at this point. The applicant tracking portion went live last week. It's so far, it's a couple of bumps, but I think for the most part, it's a very, very intuitive program. Our performance reviews and coaching process that has been completed. We're just finalizing the template to get that rolled out. I'm just really excited about all of this stuff. A lot of the stuff that really makes the system a fully integrated HCM system versus the disparate systems that we had in the past. I am proud to say that we did in the testing process. We hired Mr. John Snow from the Wall. He successfully made it through our process. And we had to fire him now. He had to go be team in Florida. But no, in all seriousness, everything went very smoothly. So we had the application, it flowed through to the payroll side, it flowed through all the way to the staff development side, to the education side. All the notifications worked, everything was really, really, really flawless. So really, really happy with that. So right now on deck, we have our leave of absence tracking. So that's tracking our FMLA, our military leave, those things. We're actually testing that's been built, but we put it on hold because we had some timing issues with our other system that we needed to prioritize the performance reviews and the applicant tracking. So then right beyond that is the document management and data and analytics. That's going to allow us to make sure that we have all of our stuff in one system. So no more saving on the W drive or the Y drive, nothing like that. People have access to their employee file at all times. And then finally, we do the benefits enrollment. We're looking to do that end of Q3, early Q4 of this year, calendar year. We want to do it at a nice, quiet time because we know that if you get that one wrong, people come to work for a couple of reasons, just to get paid and have benefits. So we want to make sure that goes smoothly. But ultimately, people are going to be able to enroll in their benefits through our portal within the system. So everything's going to be there. So what that means for payroll and the team is that they will no longer have to manually input hundreds of lines of data or upload from a spreadsheet from a third-party vendor on an annual basis, that the elections will be made in the system and they will flow through just like everything else. So again, I just wanted to acknowledge that we continue to face the staffing challenges. This is kind of an ongoing battle that we have. The recent feedback that we've got from candidates continue to be very similar: limited housing, employment opportunities for spouses, and just kind of those generally reduced amenities found in larger cities. So with that, I'll have to answer any questions. New chart for this month. This is a full-time and part-time salaried and hourly employees by department. So you can see exactly how many folks we got in each and every department here in the organization. The biggest, tallest line being our friends above Hartford.
Okay.
Well, Hartford. And that is, again, that is full-time and part-time. It's benefits eligible staff. It does not include contractors, casuals, or PRNs.
Walk me through just quickly how you're staying on top of a dozen A3s.
So basically, the dozen A3s, these are departmental A3s. So the departmental A3s are based on, we talked about this a couple of months ago, or probably I guess about 4 or 5 months ago now. So each department has their own A3s that have been allocated to burnout, working well with other departments and or security reporting, safety reporting issues. And so basically we meet with them, and then we have our quarterly meetings where we have those individuals present to all of senior leadership, and they come in and give us their progress updates and make sure that they're moving that process along. So there's, well, I mean, Gail and Kim's team has 60 or 70.
So I guess, so what's the interaction that you have on a more within the quarter? I mean, a quarter is great that you're getting quarterly, but I mean, there's, in the meantime, you're monitoring those, I assume?
Yeah, you monitor them, you check in with the managers, you touch base on a regular basis, usually every month or so. Just chat with them and make sure that, that they need any support in any of those areas. Unfortunately, a lot of the metrics that are in those A3s are driven based on the employee engagement score, which is an annual score. So really trying to get them to focus on KPIs that they can measure within their department. I think HIM has a great example, our health information management team has a great example of where they've said they want to do, in order to reduce burnout, one of the things they want is a more identifiable career ladder. Like, where did they go? How did they progress within, either within the department or within the organization? And they have training. Is there training that can help them get there? And so they've identified metrics like, we want every staff member to go through a training at least some point during the year. And so they're tracking that metric. And so trying to get that through. So by the end of the year, we get everyone through that process. Same thing like with the Leadership Academy and the other trainings that we've done. We're at the point now where we've trained all of our newer managers, and the only group that's left is there's about 7 or 8 folks that have just been here for a very long time. And so the Leadership Academy program that we developed in-house is going to evolve a little bit for that particular group, because they don't need to know how to order things, right? They've been ordering things for 10 years. And so we're going to edit that down to a smaller, shorter program for them, so we can get those through there to meet the KPIs for that one as well.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, for sure.
Any questions? Thank you. Good news. Who's on the HR payroll system, you get to.
Yeah, it's
Just use scan these.
Let's see, last night, Mr. Warner was there with us throughout, including the excitement of our power outage and the long evening. Violet's item didn't come up till near the end. We addressed the $12 million supplemental that went through smoothly, provided the questions. Like I said, that's a perfect example of when it's important when you're having 2 different bodies and making sure you have put everybody planning processes. And I'm sure sometimes from this perspective, it can feel like you go through your own internal board committees and approvals, and then to add on that assembly approval at the end, that assembly buy-in probably that is an important one.
We were able to address some of the hanging out there for non-revenue stuff that we had done. That was the revenue piece of our 2-year budget process. Looking at tax exemptions and things like that, that either didn't need to be on the books any longer, deciding whether they had a public purpose still, looking at how utilized they were and making changes based on that. So there were some changes to our tax policy. One of the more significant pieces that would have put taxes on nonprofits, sales made by nonprofits, that got punted. So that's not a dead issue, but that remains, was sent back to committee for further work. It sounds like Maureen already mentioned that, a certain degree of focus is shifted to the flood. We've been ready for the flood, so there is that natural summer slowdown as we just closed our filing period, so we know who our candidates are, and that is enough to be a little bit of a distraction for the city to need somewhat of a slowdown, but obviously there's enough important things going on that we can't slow down too much. Trying to think what else would be significant for this body. All things finances, obviously, same likewise with you, so that's why I report on. As part of when we talked about, we failed to put any bonds on the ballot, so that's been finalized now. So this Friday, knowing who the candidates are and knowing that bonds won't be part of the ballots and knowing that the citizen initiatives were approved and certified, we have a good sense of what our ballots will look like this year. Just because it's easy to miss news from the city, and I believe in communicating things 10 ways. Here's a heads up that because the state will be doing their primaries and their elections this year at the same time, for the first time ever, we won't have ballot initiatives 1 and 2. We'll have ballot initiatives A and B. So we're switching to a lettering system. I think those are the things I have offhand. I have a extra assembly member here. If there's anything that was significant in the meeting that I'm dropping, otherwise happy to answer questions.
No,
Was there
I
anything
think
else?
that's it. And you have any of your nonprofit partners,
Get the word
we
out.
realized that with 263 nonprofits in Juneau that are registered with the city, most of them had no idea that this change was coming their way. And so I feel like it's a lot more work. I have a question.
Yeah.
With that in particular.
Yeah.
You mentioned that it got punted. What do you expect the timeline for that punt to be?
So that will be on the September finance meeting, so I expect we'll work amendments there, and then the interim, I know members of the body, in addition to any work that staff does, but I know members of the body will be communicating with nonprofits to, I'm sure the communications department will help with that, just to make sure that people are aware. We already have received a certain degree of engagement from the nonprofit community. But that does put it, should the assembly decide after that September finance meeting, where any amendments get made, any changes to the ordinance gets made, then that would get kicked back to that next assembly meeting, which is sort of this class before the election. So it's still on track to be decided one way or another.
There was discussion earlier in the meeting about the temporary sales tax being back on the ballot for this fall.
The 3%.
Yeah, is there concern about the viability of that if it's not passed, what that means to the city?
If the 3% didn't pass, that would be catastrophic to the city.
Devastating.
Yeah, I mean, that would be an entirely different city.
I know there was discussion about some additional ballot measures that are going to be put on for taxes.
Right, so the 3% is, those things rotate, so the 3% is just our normal 3%, it's coming up right on cycle. I think there's added, given the
tone of the ballot measures last year, just, there's probably some concern to make sure that there's good education for people to understand that the 3% tax would be catastrophic if it wasn't there for the city. In addition to that, the two ballot initiatives that were certified. One is a charter amendment, and it seeks to return the property tax cap, which got lowered in the last election, back to 12 mil, which is where it was for a long time historically. Doesn't mean that the property taxes would go up that high, but it basically takes that off. And the reason they can do that is because every time you amend the charter, that's your charter in place, so it becomes the new charter every time. The other one on the ballot is a 1% seasonal sales tax. And finance had estimated that would bring in, based on data they had,
So about 6 million?
an additional 6 million or something like that. If all things being equal, staying the same, obviously inflation and other things would change that, so should all of those pass, the 3% would just be normal, the 1% would represent some additional income coming in. And then you would still need an assembly who would be willing to raise the dollar in order to make people so good.
What will the sales tax end up being?
So if the seasonal pass, then it would be 5 in the winter and 6 in the summer. If your 1% is kept. It's kept on.
Yeah, a lot of people are confused about the numbers.
I agree. Yeah, there's definitely need to do some education. And to make it clear that some of those are, I mean, all of those are minus the 3% from the community, not from the city.
This is what the 2% currently covers it.
Yeah, so the 3% as it stands now, the way that's allocated is 1% goes to police, fire, street maintenance, snow removal, EMT, ambulance services, parks and recs, libraries, and other general purposes. 1% goes solely to roads, drainage, retaining walls, sidewalks, stairs, other capital improvement. And then 1% annually allocated by the assembly among capital improvements. Emergency budget reserve and other general public services, but so it's really that's your general government function. That's what pays for that. So yeah, good thing to reference.
You have a question for Mrs. Smith? Thank you, that was great information.
I'm gonna continue to listen in. I did get I'm a little high. Dr. Totten could attest I'm a little high on Benadryl right now by IV, so I'm gonna continue to listen to you guys on the phone. No, I haven't. Yeah.
All right, speaking of Dr. Todd.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all right. Is there some way you can give us some information in the future about like, these are full-time, part-time and full-time employees of Bartlett?
Correct.
So I'm looking at this and I don't know what a med staff employee is.
That's our medical staff, that's Carmi's team.
Okay, all right, and then.
Is that head count for FTE?
Education.
Okay, and then the other thing is, what is a physician office admin? Is that not med staff? Is that? I just, and then orthopedics, are those we have 7 orthopedic, those the people in clinic, or those 7 orthopedics?
Yeah, it's awesome.
It'd be the whole department. Yeah, it's not that orthopedic doc.
That would be-
This is by department.
Yeah.
And then family medicine, you have 18 people? Because that is like all the staff.
Yeah. That would include anyone that's full-time, part-time, salaried, or hourly. Full-time, part-time, hourly, or salaried employees of
Just was unfair.
Questions? No, we'll go to you back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We had a joint meeting with the board, since we last met, which was great. I really appreciate everybody that comes from the board for that. It's really helpful to have that opportunity to talk with everybody and understand on a, more conversational level about everything that's going on. So thank you for that time. I think a lot of the medical staff attention right now is focused on the CRNA issue that we talked about earlier. And anesthesia in general. You know, we're really interested in what the board's opinion is on what to do with CRNAs, and very thankful for the financial information to be shared and to be included in this discussion to go forward. Thank you. And with the anesthesia transition, there is Seattle Anesthesia is a group that's been providing anesthesia services at Bartlett for many years. And they're leaving in the end of September, kind of September 21st. And so, you know, a lot of the medical staff is interested in watching how that goes. There's going to be a significant transition in the providers too. A lot of the physicians from that group are not staying. So we'll have a lot of new providers coming on and trying to make that go smoothly. It's my understanding of how the transition is going too. So the medical staff is paying close attention to that, interested in details, and wanting to help make that transition smooth. That's what we can. Other than that, it's business as usual.
Any questions for Dr. Cotton? All right. We've had a long conversation. I don't have a lot more to add to the conversations. Many of you have been a party to the conversations that we've been having in various meetings, the committee of the whole, and our other committee meetings. So I appreciate all of you who attend the committee meetings, not just the committee members, or at least watch the video afterwards. So thanks a lot for the participation from everyone on the board. And we have some, we've been talking about headwinds for months, and those headwinds have not gone away. So hang in there, everybody. So next is the board calendar. All right. Planning committee, we're still on for the 7th.
Okay. The governance committee could have a meeting next month, and that's putting that to the committee, but what their pleasure is. I think we have to look at the committee, start forming the committee self-evaluation. That's one thing. And early in the year, you had asked us to review the committee charters for all the committees, and we haven't done that yet, but I don't know if those have all been collected, have they?
Not to my knowledge.
So that would argue for postponing our meeting. And then the other thing that we need to do, I think, in our next meeting is review the bylaws. And I think that'll probably be simple. I'll just ask everybody to read the bylaws before we get together. But anyway, I'll put it to the committee whether you want to meet in August or postpone that to September.
My preference would be to postpone it to September. That's fine. Is it?
I hope the other meeting in August works.
Dates after, but later. When we get closer to the September. Let's see, finance, the 21st, that hasn't changed. I don't have.
Works for me. Does that work for you? Doesn't work, Brent? Are you? Jean, does the 21st work for you?
Yes. Is that me, Phil?
Jimmy, you're muted. Oh, there's Phil.
Sorry, yes, that works for me.
So the 24th, since the board meeting's the 25th, I think we're gonna have to stick with the 21st. And it's, since you're gone that whole week, because the 14th is kind of early, it'd be nice to have at least some sort of indication about how July goes and have playoffs if we do it on the 21st. So let's just stick with the 21st. Yeah.
Anybody want to add anything else? The quality is the 20th. It's 3:30. Okay, that's the 20 to 3:30. That's still okay with you, Gail?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's reschedule for this month. Okay, I would entertain a motion to accept the calendar as submitted.
So moved.
Second?
Right.
All right. Before we go into executive session, any other board comments or questions?
We were doing the A3s an A3 presentation, and I know they've taken some time. We've got a lot of other things on the plate, but I, for one, really appreciated those A3 presentations by staff. I get a lot of, it's good education experience.
Yeah, my intent was to have one this month, but when we put the letter on the board agenda, I pulled it off just because it's having excited.
Okay.
I really do that.
Thank you.
So we also had tentatively agreed to have every other meeting be an education, and then the next meeting be an A3. So we have not been successful in getting into that cadence, but we'll get back to it.
Great.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I had a couple of things. We agreed at the end of last year that we should have at least one meeting, I think, put it where we don't have any hospital business on the agenda. That here we are halfway through the calendar year, and I don't think we made much noise.
We're talking about a social.
Yeah. So I just thought I'd remind you about that. That's one thing.
Yeah.
The other thing, this is something that's bothered me for a long time. As I was going through the credentialing files this last time, it reminded me of an issue from before. When we put we voted on the bylaws for the robotic surgery. We said in there that the physician had to either have an MD or a DO degree. At that time, I raised this issue because there are physicians credentialed in this hospital that do not have that degree. Foreign graduates in the British system, for example, typically have an MBBS degree or an MBBCH degree. I think the New Zealand has a different degree that they give. And some of those graduates end up in our residency programs and become licensed. I think the medical bylaws require physicians to have an MD or DO degree. And we have credentialed physicians that do not have those degrees. So that's just a little bit of housekeeping that I think we should straighten out.
We need to look at. Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm gonna turn that over to Joe to do research that.
Okay, thank you.
And he can delegate it appropriately. Exactly.
And Carmen knows, I've raised that issue. She's talking to Hardy Springer.
All right, any other board comments? I would entertain a motion to move into executive session. We will, once we get into executive session, because we've been at it for 2 hours now, and we're going to take a 10-minute break. So.
I agree with the board of directors that Bartlett Regional Hospital recess into executive session to discuss several matters as required by law. Municipal charter or ordinance are required to be confidential or involve consideration of records that are not subject to public disclosure. Specifically, the credentialing report, medical staff meeting minutes, patient safety dashboards, and legal updates.
Second, please.
Second.
Okay, we are in executive session. I would thank you, Ms. Hall, for
Yeah.
All right. Kelsey, want to do your usual?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I move that we accept the credential report.
I second that. Any objections? Seeing none? I think we are done. Thank you all. We are adjourned.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.
Too bad.